So this video is one of the earliest Adventures with Purpose panels after their video had been released. So it's Jared Lysek on Zav Girl. And I know we don't like Jared, and some people may be like, well, we don't want to listen to him because we don't like him, but he still has valuable information. So I've gone through, this started out as a 40-minute video, but because Jared loves talking about himself and he is someone who does talk a lot, it is condensed down quite a bit. So I've removed out all the parts where he's talking about other cases or talking about himself, and that cut it down by more than a third. So the reason I think this is an important panel interview to listen to is because it is one of the early ones. And what I've found is that the early ones are the ones when the team members of Adventures with Purpose were less reluctant with their answers. So here Jared is giving some quite direct answers, which we may or may not be able to draw some information from. Two things that I think are important to note here before we start. One is that I know the trolls are going to come out and say, why we're listening to Jared because he wasn't there. The thing is, Adventures with Purpose is his business. He was in constant communication with Doug Bishop the whole time. We've seen him in the Nick interview creating a video message for Jared that he shared. We've seen him getting text messages while out searching, and I think we can be pretty confident that that was Jared. We know that Doug would have kept Jared up with everything that was going on every step of the way. We also know that being his business and his channel, that he would have seen all the footage. So to the trolls who want to say, why are you looking at Jared, he wasn't there, that is why. He's just as informed as every other team member that was actually there. The other thing I wanted to point out is that where I've said this was one of the early interviews straight after the release of the video, I should have mentioned that this is after the release of the members only video. So this is before the video had been made public even. That's how early on this was. So let's make a start.
As far as the different depths, real quick, for what you guys were talking about, 10 feet versus 14 feet, at the back of the vehicle versus the front of the vehicle, you are on a hillside, so you can get different readings there, as well as on sonar, as it's hitting different portions of the car, as the car is slanted. Some portions of it, at ground level is going to be 14 feet at the lower portion, whereas 10 feet, as you're coming up the hillside. And then when you're directly over the vehicle, now it's going to pick up that distance of, it's 5-6 feet. So now you're only going to get a read in of, 7 feet, 7 to 10 feet or so. So you will see different readings on the sonar as we're going over it.
I won't dwell on that part too much because I've gone over it quite a few times in the past. But I will just point out again what he's saying there about the car being on a hill. So at the lowest point, the ground level was 14 foot, meaning that the top of the car there would have been 9 foot underwater, while at the highest point, he's saying around 10 foot, so the highest point of the car there would have been about 5 foot underwater. And I did some calculations on one of my videos where I showed that even at the deepest, when the car supposedly first went in, the highest point of the vehicle when it first went in, if apparently it went in on the night of the party, still would have been higher than the highest point of the lowest end of the vehicle from when the vehicle first went in. In other words, what helicopter pilots were saying about that they could see to the bottom of the reservoir, and the fact that we could see when they were about to recover the vehicle, we could actually see it in the water. So it should have been visible from day one, based on what Jared is saying. Also, as pointed out by someone, they had divers in the water right there. Now, when a diver goes in the water, when they jump in, they are going to go down a bit before they float back up again. So a diver over the top of that vehicle should have actually landed on the vehicle had it been there at the time. Anyway, if you want to have a look at a more in-depth discussion of this, there are other videos that I have done previously, so if you flick through my playlist, you'll find other videos which discuss the depth of the water.
There's a lot more that we have cut out of the video. If certain things do happen, I'll just announce it right here. We have 2 other videos to be released if certain things do take place, and it's just going to be a whole, I mean, nobody knew this footage even existed from the tow truck driver, but we have the full uncut, raw, complete interview with him, as well as his girlfriend, who is a nurse. You know, they are credible, stand-up people. They tracked us down. It was, you know, the rolling billboard of AWP, and just seeing us pulling off of the interstate at Best Buy that first night that we got in town. We didn't track them down. It was just they saw us, just a chance encounter, and they tracked us down, and we had the interview with them.
Wow. It really is a shame that they never released the interview with the girlfriend, because I think that could have helped us to feel more or less confident about Nick's interview. Now, I think it is interesting that to him, he says that they are both credible individuals who tracked the team down. They saw the big truck thing that AWP have, and you can't miss that as being anything other than AWP. So he's saying that they are credible, or at least that based on the interactions that the Adventures with Purpose team had, that their belief is that they are credible. Obviously, nobody could say 100% unless they saw that actual footage that was taken from the vehicle.
Which is why we ended up over there at Boca instead of over at Prosser to begin with. Had we ended up on Prosser based upon our normal search and the way that we do things of where were they last seen, what was the last cell phone ping, we would have been right there, and we would have, you know, on day 1 versus day 2. So,
Jared, are you saying that the reason that you went to Boca first is because of the tow truck guy, or
yeah.
like a?
Because we always go off of last known location, and so
yeah,
we have no doubt in trusting him because of his presence, his girlfriend, and that the same story was told 3 times. It was, you know, it was from memory. It wasn't like I'm making this up on the spot. And so very credible, which gives us a new last known location.
Now, there was at one point in time people speculating that Nick had been set up by Adventures with Purpose as part of the story. So I'm going to point out a few things here. First of all, from the get-go, Adventures with Purpose have always made it their policy to go to the last known location of an individual. So they're not going to set up a fake witness at a different last known location, because it's basically added an extra day's work for them. And in terms of the extra day's work, don't forget that them coming in to look for Kiely was on the end of a rather long trip. They had finished their trip, they'd done multiple stops, and were headed back home. So this was basically an add-on, meaning that it was going to take them longer before they got back home again and finished their trip. And you can imagine when you're doing a working trip like this, extra days when you're already exhausted and not something that you want to do unnecessarily. So I think it also speaks to how credible they believed Nick to be, that they did cover Boca first. Because had they had doubts about his credibility, they would have gone to Prosser, which was the last known location. They had the Julissa Fuentes case to move on to as well. So, and they're not known for hanging around for lengthy periods of time. I've seen videos where they've spent a few days in a location, didn't find their target, as they refer to it, and then headed off and said, well, we'll come back and do it next spring. So for them, time is something that is a consideration. So that, to me, says that them being willing to do Boca first and put off Prosser for an extra day says that they felt Nick was quite credible. They've also mentioned that they heard him say his story 3 times and that it was corroborated by his girlfriend, and it didn't sound made up, as in the story sounded authentic and matched each time he told it. So I think there's a few significant things there that tell us that at the very least, Adventures with Purpose saw Nick as being quite credible. And I think it also puts to bed any of the speculation that they might have actually got Nick in themselves to try and make their video look better. And to be honest, I think that anyone who has suggested that is almost certainly someone who's never ever watched any of their previous content, because they would know that to be utter bullshit.
Oh my gosh.
In
wow.
this as well, and I don't know, I can't remember if we showed it on video or not, but we did make an immediate phone call to the detectives as well to verify this. Now the thing is that you have multiple people taking these tips, from 2 different counties and 18 different agencies. And so while the detective that we made contact with immediately on the spot, while Nick the tow truck driver is there with us that night, that detective that we spoke to had never heard this this confession, this story before. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't recorded somewhere else. Remember, what was there, like 1,500 or 2,000 tips that came in, and they have to filter through all of them. So
exactly,
so we cannot sit here and say, well, this is completely made up story, and who was this guy just out of the blue, and there's going to be so many conspiracy theories, as as to this.
So we know from one of the accounts that Nick claimed to have spoken to a detective, but that the detective didn't ever get back to him about it. We also know that there were multiple detectives on the case, and on top of all that, we know that tips weren't exactly being treated as hugely important. So many people gave important tips and there was no follow-up, which leads me to the question, something that I hadn't considered until listening to this. At the point when they found Kiely and her vehicle, they probably hadn't finished going through all the tips they'd received. In terms of detectives probably hadn't finished going through all the tips they'd received. Is it possible that they decided the case, basically, once Kiely was found, and decided not to bother going through any more tips because they had made up their mind that she must have driven herself into the reservoir? Is it possible that these tips that we've heard that raise eyebrows simply never made it to detectives? Because, like I said, so many people have said that there was no follow-up on their tips. So perhaps that little bit of paper got just left somewhere and not passed on to detectives. You just have to look at the Delphi case, where it took them 5 years to go back and find that one account of Richard Allen speaking to, it wasn't even a regular law enforcement person, it was like a ranger or something, and saying that he had been there that day and giving a description of his own clothes. So it happens, and it certainly seems to have happened in Kiely's case, that tips just didn't get passed on. Is that why it was ruled an accident? Perhaps they didn't have the full picture.
Coming back to the car and floating, and if somebody's involved or not. Like I said, if somebody is, we have the entire interview, which will just be like, you're going to be blown away with that one, as well as the full interaction with Dad and Grandpa, right there at Lakeside, versus what we cut down.
Now, first of all, oh my gosh, I would love to be able to see the full interview with Dad and Grandpa. But here's what's really interesting to me. The context of what he's just said. He's talking about how he's still talking about footage that they've kept and not released. And he's already mentioned the full Nick interview, which we got to see eventually. But he's talking about how basically if charges are laid and if it does become like obviously a criminal case, then they are going to release the interview with Dad and Grandpa. Essentially, that's what he's saying. So to me, what he's saying there is that something that they said to Adventures with Purpose leads them to believe even more so that there was foul play involved. Something was said that makes them want to hold on to the rest of that conversation and only release it if criminal charges have been laid. In other words, he's saying that there's something there that could be quite damning towards somebody. Or at least that's my interpretation. I'd love to know what other people think about that.
We hope it's not true. We hope there's nothing more than an accident, but we don't know. At this point, we're all speculating as to what's presented before us right now. In questioning whether, now that it's out, and you see that Nick in the video that we put out to members today, we can now confirm, we can put it out there publicly. Yes, she was in the back of the car. Now, the question that my wife came to me is, for me, the back is the back, but my wife, said, what part of the back? Well, she wasn't in the back seat. She was in the back. Okay. And so now when you start breaking this down, again, just speculation, even though she is a small gal, you only have so much space.
A little space.
I love those little interjections here and there from Ryan. It just adds to it. But what Jared's saying here is spot on, and what everyone has said. That space from the top of the seat to the ceiling, to get through there into the very back section of the car, especially when you're in a panic, is not an easy thing. I know I saw one video where someone opened up the boot of their CRV and did a video showing how easily they climbed into the back. But the thing is that they were helped by the fact that the boot was open, because you could see that they basically leaned further out than where the boot would have been in order to get themselves over the seat adequately and into the cargo area. It's not just about getting through that gap between the seat and the ceiling, but it's having the room to maneuver as you are getting through that gap and maneuver yourself into the boot area. It's highly, highly unlikely that she would have been able to maneuver her entire body into that whole back section. And if she was scrambling to get out of the vehicle, then you would expect that she wouldn't have tucked her whole body into that section. And don't forget also, there were 2 windows open, and that back window was open. The distance, the gap that the window was open, was a greater gap than the distance between the back of the seat and the roof of the car. Think about that.
You also have that this car is not sinking in the same way that a car with the windows up are going to sink, which would be a 2 to 10 minute float, and then the car, drops down. You have plenty of, air in there that's going to give you time to think about how you're going to escape with putting windows down versus a window that is down, which now you have nothing trapping the air, which means the vehicle is going to go under much quicker.
The thing that he doesn't really point out in terms of the windows being open when the car went under is that the car would have gone down at a sort of a diagonal slant. In other words, that front window that was open, the water would have started pouring in there first. So that corner of the car would have been submersing way faster than the back diagonal corner where the other window was open. So if she was conscious, if she was in the vehicle and conscious when the vehicle went under, started going under, and the water started going in, would have been far, far, far easier to get out that side window at the back than to try and scrabble into the very back of the vehicle.
Yeah,
hey,
you
Jared,
don't.
can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
First of all, you're awesome. And would you be able to comment on the verification of the tow truck driver dash cam at all?
So the footage of that one was locked up by his company. And so the moment that it was made known that this might be a part of something, they just locked it down. He does not, because it's not his company. It wasn't his. He doesn't own the truck. It's now in the database cloud somewhere. But everybody is aware of that, and the law enforcement is following up on that. So we do not have it. He does not have it.
Okay, so
but what I
need a warrant to get it.
What I can say and touch on this is that, and this will be in our full released unedited interview if it goes this direction. But let me just say it here: is that Nick thought that this was so odd that once he was done with the call, he pulled down the road, pulled over, called his girlfriend, and he told her what had happened. So this is where we now have her story, and she was there as well, that you didn't see her on camera at that moment in time, but we do have her on camera as well, that she collaborates his story as to he was there and how odd this was. And she remembers the day because it was her dad's birthday, so she does not forget that it was Saturday.
There's nothing new in all this. We know that the footage was locked up by the tow truck company. We know that Adventures with Purpose haven't seen the footage. I would like to hear confirmation, though, that the footage did actually make it to law enforcement, because that seems to be something that has not been confirmed either way. And now moving on to talking about the girlfriend, once again, it would be really good if we could see that interview, because it sounds like, from what Jared is saying, that she solidly collaborates what Nick said. So perhaps that would help us in our assessment of Nick. And she also mentioned the part where it was her dad's birthday, so she remembered that it was the Saturday.
But again, I mean, I don't know Nick from, anybody. I don't have any reason to, discredit or think otherwise. And don't say, don't hold this, as the golden, the golden law here.
Mm-hmm.
as 100% true, as 100% truth or fact. I don't know, until more information comes out or something happens that can collaborate and verify this. We're just saying what has been passed on to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we, in the edit, you saw we were very, respectful, blurred out certain things, and we left out a lot to not point fingers, not to speculate, but to simply bring more information out there to release our video because, as you guys know, there was whether it was a fake account or whether it was a real account, we started to get thrown under the bus, and we just let the video, speak for itself.
I believe what he's referring to there was the statement made by Lindsay that was critical of Adventures with Purpose and them turning the whole thing into a spectacle. I do remember that there was a lot of speculation as to whether that was actually her who made that post or whether it was someone posing as her. I think we verified that it was her in the end. Certainly was the same sort of language that she used, and for someone to have that high level of literacy skills and to be trying to pretend that they were Lindsay just sounds a little bit unlikely. So this gets us to roughly the halfway mark in terms of Jared's interview on Zav Girl. So it's a good spot for me to stop it here, and I will do a follow-up video probably tomorrow, which will have the rest of what Jared said. So thanks for listening. If you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. It costs you nothing and it helps me continue to make these videos. Also, hit the like button and please leave a comment below. Thank you.